Hey, Baruch Levi B here from the Defiant Spirit. Thanks for tuning in. I want to share with you some ideas on a podcast I just did this past week. I shifted gears a little bit and I'm doing a series called The Enneagram and the movies. And so I'm going through all nine types and how each one is portrayed in movies or on in television shows, different characters. Why? Because I love the Enneagram. I teach the Enneagram. I created an entire system to navigate life based on this ancient wisdom system. It's ancient and it is absolutely uncanny in describing how we live in what I call reaction or response based on the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl. Either we're living in reaction, unconscious, sort of stumbling through life, depending on our circumstances, and we just end up reacting, or we choose our response. Viktor Frankl called this responsibility, responsibility, the ability to choose your response. And so the Enneagram simply lays out 9 different ways that we end up reacting or showing us how we can respond. And you can see it behind me. Those are the 9 different ways. And so one of the ways I'm teaching now the Enneagram is through pop culture, because it's just so much more engaging and fun when you're watching a movie with your kids and they're engaged in the Enneagram and you're engaged, and we start talking about the Enneagram through the television show or the movie. And that's what my family does. My kids, one of my kids is 11 and he's totally engaged in the Enneagram. My oldest is 20. He's totally engaged in the Enneagram. Everybody in between, they type their friends, they talk about it with their friends. They use it as a communication tool, as a growth tool. I mean, how many things in life can we sit down and watch a movie around and connect with the people around the television so that it's not just entertainment? Nothing wrong with entertainment, but wow, it becomes so much more amazing when we can see it through the lens of um, personal and relationship growth. So this is Enneagram 1, and this is the podcast I just did. So the podcast was like 30 minutes. I'm only going to do a couple minutes, but I want to show you what we're looking at with Enneagram 1. Enneagram 1 is called the reformer, the perfectionist, and these are some of the examples that I use for teaching Enneagram 1. Now, if you do my program, Defy Your Number, you get this and so much more. But my program is based on it's an Enneagram program. So you can discover your Enneagram type, and then you can learn how to defy your Enneagram type, to stop living in reaction, to start choosing your response. And so this is from the ebook, and I have like 40 plus pages in there. And this is one of them, but I use pop music or music and different genres of music or art and sports and also the traditional Enneagram tools and teachings. But this is a page from there, and it's Name That One. So this gives you a sense of who the reformer is. Of course, these are caricatures. Of course, these are extremes, highs and lows, but these are some. Now, I don't say these are 100% Enneagram ones, but by and large, they are. They got the feeling, the vibe, though some of them may be a little off, and some of them you can make the case for multiple different types. So let's start with superheroes, because when I think of the Enneagram 1, that perfectionist, that reformer. Perfectionist usually gets a bad rap. It's sort of somebody who's OCD or anal retentive. But where does that come from? The reformers I know, my son, my brother, many of my clients, these are people who with a strong sense of justice. And I would say that is one of the drivers for the Enneagram 1, justice. Right and wrong. They see the world in black and white, which can be good and it can be not so good. So the good is that these are people who tend to live with something is right and something is wrong. And Enneagram ones have the strongest moral code and compass I know. If you look at superheroes, at least the origin story of the superheroes, today they're a little more complex. But back in the 1930s and 40s, when they were emerging, they were coming from a place of moral justice, right and wrong, and fighting. The good guy always wins and the bad guy always loses, evil versus good. And so you look at Captain America, one of the first superheroes, or Superman. They were, the original superheroes were fighting Nazis. They were drawn mostly by Jews who needed a mythical figure to give them hope. And so if you look at the early Superman, you look at the early Captain America, they were literally fighting Hitler. They were fighting Nazis. They were a call to restore justice in a world that felt completely unjust. And so ones carry the sense of right and wrong. Batman and Wonder Woman, and these are all Enneagram 1 caricatures. Enneagram ones get themselves into trouble when they start living in that black and white, because it is true there are times when life is absolute. There are moral black and white, there's no gray, but most of the time, most of life are shades of gray. And that's some of the work of a one. So if you look through here on this slide, you'll see lots of individuals who really struggle with the nuance. They get in trouble when they get into that black and white. I'm looking at Claire from Modern Family. I'm sure many of you have watched Modern Family, a great show. My family and I watch it. And Claire is a quintessential one. So she'll get stuck in these sort of binary black and white, good and bad, and she can drive her family crazy when she gets stuck in this and losing that sort of nuance. Pop culture, Elsa. I mean, one of my kids was obsessed with Elsa, and Elsa ends up in like an icy cold castle because she can't live in the nuance, the complexity. And so ones can really get themselves into a lot of trouble when they get into this place of black and white. Monica from Friends, there's this finger wagging thing that a ones will start doing. I think of, is it on here? The church lady, it's not on here, it should be, from SNL, Dana Carvey. Isn't that special? But there was this like judgment, this criticism, this critical nature, and ones are the most critical of any Enneagram type. Now, it comes from this place of moral, goodness, but it can easily degenerate into finger wagging, into criticism. It can even degenerate into being a hypocrite. So do as I say, not as I do. And a lot of ones have gotten themselves into trouble by not walking their talk. But you can see the moral high and the struggles, the low of each of these characters on here. I'll just give you one more because I want to get you over to the podcast so that you can watch it. But I think of the bottom left corner, totally random, Jennifer Grey. I don't remember her name of her character in this movie, Ferris Bueller, but you remember the movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Like the whole time she's like, right? Her brother Ferris Bueller's having a good old time, and she's that one. She wants, justice, so she's constantly trying to get him caught, and she's making her life miserable. She's making the people around her miserable by going down this path of just holding on too tight. And my work with the ones is oftentimes to get them to release their grip on right and wrong, on being good. It is said with Enneagram types that, the job of an Enneagram coach like myself is to help all of them become better. But with an Enneagram 1, it's to help them become worse. And so in that movie, you can see finally she gets to this place where she embraces the bad girl in herself, the not, black and white way of being in the world. And she starts to loosen up and she starts to be more forgiving and compassionate. And frankly, she starts to have more fun. All of these characters need to lighten up, to loosen up, to get into the grays and to take a deep breath and to have a little more fun. They're the most responsible type, but sometimes being responsible can become a burden and a curse and not a blessing when it starts to crush us and our spirit and those around us. And so sometimes the Enneagram 1 just has to be a little worse. If you want to hear more about the podcast and Enneagram 1 in cinema, jump over to defiantspirit.org/podcast, or you can just go over to defiantspirit.org and you can find your way to the podcast where you can download this slide and you can hear more about the one. Next one will be 2. I think it's already up and out. So I'll tell you more about the Enneagram 2, the helper, later, but you can listen to it over there. Until then, discover your number so you can defy your number and live your spirit. I will see you in the next video.